What if I told you that the greatest terror Rome ever faced did not come from invading armies, did not come from barbarian tribes, did not come from famine or plague, but came from something far more dangerous, something that looked human, something that smiled, something that spoke like a leader, but thought like a nightmare? What if the most terrifying weapon in history was not a sword, not a spear, not even fire, but absolute power, placed in the hands of a young man whose mind was breaking? Because that is exactly what happened in Rome. And the strangest part is, Rome asked for it. Rome begged for it. Rome celebrated it. They didn't see the monster arriving. They welcomed him with cheers. They called him savior. But soon, those cheers turned into whispers, and those whispers turned into fear, and that fear turned into silence. Because under this emperor, even silence could get you killed. So let me ask you something. Have you ever imagined what it feels like to live in a city where every step could be your last, where every laugh could be misunderstood, where even the smallest facial expression might be interpreted as disrespect, betrayal, or mockery? Have you ever imagined waking up in the morning, not knowing if your name will still exist at night? Have you ever imagined being a senator, one of the most powerful men on earth, and yet being more terrified than a slave, because at least a slave knows he has no power? But you are powerful, and that makes you visible. And in a world ruled by madness, visibility becomes a death sentence. Because this was Rome, not Rome of glory, not Rome of triumph, but Rome of trembling hands, Rome of locked doors, Rome of men who bowed not out of loyalty, but out of survival. And at the center of that fear stood a young emperor with an innocent face and a soul that history would remember as one of the darkest ever to wear a crown. His name was Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, but nobody remembers that name. History remembers the nickname, Caligula, the Little Boots, a nickname born from childhood, a nickname once spoken with affection, a nickname once associated with hope. So here's the first question. How does a boy called Little Boots, a boy who grew up in military camps, running between Roman soldiers like a mascot, wearing tiny sandals and armor, smiling at legionaries who adored him, become the emperor whose very name made Rome go quiet? How does a child become terror? And here's another question. Was Caligula always a monster? Or did Rome, did politics, did betrayal create him? Because Caligula did not rise from nowhere. He was not born in darkness. He was born into a family Rome worshipped. His father Germanicus was not just famous. He was beloved, respected, almost holy in the eyes of the people. The kind of general whose presence alone made soldiers feel unstoppable. The kind of man crowds screamed for as if he was already a legend. Rome expected Germanicus to become emperor. Rome trusted him. Rome loved him. But then, he died. Suddenly, suspiciously. And when Germanicus died, Rome didn't just lose a hero, Caligula lost his protection. So let me ask you, what happens to a child whose father becomes a myth, but whose family becomes a target? Because after Germanicus's death, Caligula's world turned into a cage of shadows. He watched relatives disappear. He watched family members get accused. He watched powerful men smile in public and poison in private. He learned something early, something no child should ever learn. In Rome, love is temporary, but fear lasts forever. And then came the Emperor Tiberius, a man who ruled not with affection, but with suspicion. Under Tiberius, Rome became a stage where everyone wore a mask. A wrong word could ruin you. A wrong friend could destroy you. A rumor could kill you. So tell me, how do you grow up in a palace like that? A palace where walls have ears, where servants are spies, where every dinner might be a trap, and still remain human? Can anyone remain human? Or do you eventually become what the palace demands? Because Caligula survived. He smiled. He played innocent. He learned to speak softly, to hide emotions, to pretend loyalty. And Rome looked at him and believed, this young man is harmless. But that was the illusion. because the calmest face in the palace often hides the sharpest blade. And then the day came. The day Rome thought it was saved. The day Tiberius died. The day the Senate announced the new emperor. The day people flooded the streets screaming his name. Caligula! Caligula! And here comes the most chilling question of all. What if the crowd was cheering for the beginning of its own nightmare? Because when Caligula stepped into power, he did not look like a tyrant. He looked like hope. He looked like youth. He looked like the son of Germanicus, the golden blood of Rome. He promised generosity. He promised justice. He promised a new era. And Rome, desperate after years of paranoia, believed him. For a moment, Rome smiled again. But history has a rule. When hope comes too fast, it often hides a price. And the price, in this story, would be blood. Because only a few months into his reign, something happened. Caligula fell violently ill. Some say it was fever. Some say it was poison. Some say it was fate. But whatever it was, it nearly killed him. And when he returned, Rome noticed the change. His eyes were different. His laughter sounded colder. His kindness became unpredictable. And suddenly, the same emperor who was once loved began to feel like a stranger. So here is the final question before we begin. Did Caligula come back from sickness, or did something else come back in his body? Something darker, something broken, something that did not want love, but wanted control. Because what happened next was not politics, it was terror. And once Caligula began, Rome could not stop him. Before Caligula became the emperor who terrified Rome, before the palace halls filled with whispers, before senators learned to smile while shaking inside, he was just a boy surrounded by armor, dust, and marching feet. But here's the first question. How does a child grow up among soldiers, hearing war stories like bedtime tales, watching men bleed and die like it's normal, and still remain innocent? Because Caligula's childhood was not peaceful. It was not soft. It was Roman. He was born as Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus into the most powerful bloodline in the empire. And his father wasn't just any man. His father was Germanicus, a name Rome didn't pronounce casually. They pronounced it like a prayer. Germanicus was the golden general, the hero the soldiers would follow into hell, the commander the people expected to become emperor. And when Caligula was still small, he followed his father's legions through military camps, wearing a miniature soldier outfit, including tiny boots. Those boots were called Caligulae. That's why the soldiers laughed and called him Caligula. Little boots? It sounded harmless, cute, even lovable. But again, here comes another question. What kind of boy is nicknamed like a toy, yet grows up to be feared like a nightmare? Because there is something deeply disturbing about this contrast. The same child once carried by soldiers, later carrying a whole empire into terror. And to understand Caligula, you must understand the world that raised him. Rome was not a place where people grew up normal. Rome was a machine that rewarded power and crushed weakness. And Caligula learned this early, because while Germanicus was adored by the empire, the palace was full of enemies, jealous men, greedy men, men who smiled while planning death. And then it happened. Germanicus died, suddenly, far away from Rome. And immediately, rumors exploded like fire. Was he poisoned? Was he betrayed? Was he removed because he was too loved? Because in Rome, being loved could be dangerous. Sometimes it was more dangerous than being hated. So imagine this. You're Caligula, still a child, and one day your father, the strongest man in your world, disappears. Your protection is gone. Your family becomes vulnerable. Your name becomes a target. So here's the question. What does that do to a mind that's still forming? What does it do to a heart that's still learning what the world is? Because after Germanicus' death, Caligula's life didn't become tragic. It became political. And politics in Rome was blood. His mother, Agrippina the Elder, was powerful and proud, and that made her dangerous to the wrong people. Soon the family was attacked. accused, exiled. Some relatives were executed, some were erased, some simply vanished. And Caligula watched. He watched how quickly Rome could turn love into betrayal. He watched how quickly hero's son could become enemy's child. And the scariest thing is, Caligula did not cry loudly. He didn't rebel. He learned to survive because he understood something terrifyingly early. In Rome, innocence doesn't protect you. It exposes you. So he started building a mask, a polite mask, a calm mask, a silent mask. He learned when to smile, when to bow, when to disappear. And soon he was taken to the most dangerous place possible, the court of Emperor Tiberius. Now here's another question. What kind of emperor was Tiberius? A paranoid one, a man who trusted no one, a man who believed betrayal was everywhere. Under Tiberius, the palace was not a home. It was a prison of silk, a cage covered in gold. People whispered because walls had ears. Servants reported conversations. Friends betrayed friends. Senators wrote letters accusing each other. Executions were common. Exile was normal. Fear was everyday life. So imagine young Caligula growing up in that environment. And tell me, how do you stay sane in a palace that rewards paranoia? How do you learn kindness in a place that teaches cruelty? The answer is simple. You don't. You learn performance. You learn acting. You learn to be whatever the emperor needs you to be. And Caligula became the perfect actor. He was quiet, obedient, respectful. Tiberius did not see him as a threat. In fact, Tiberius believed Caligula was harmless. And that may have been Caligula's greatest weapon, because while Rome looked at him and saw a young man with tragedy behind his eyes, Caligula looked at Rome and learned something darker. They don't want truth. They want a face they can believe. So he became that face. He became hope. He became the son of Germanicus. He became the dream Rome wanted to touch again. But what was happening inside him was different, because a boy who spends his childhood watching family members get destroyed does not grow up seeking peace. He grows up seeking control. He grows up thinking, if I don't become powerful, I will be erased like the rest of them. That is how Caligula was built, not in battles, not in schools, but in trauma, suspicion, and survival. And then, destiny opened the door. Tiberius died. The empire looked around and saw the young survivor, the beautiful face, the name that still carried magic, Germanicus's son. And in the year 37 AD, at just 24 years old, Caligula became emperor. And here's the most chilling question of all. Did Rome crown a savior? Or did Rome crown a man who had been quietly breaking for years, waiting for a throne, waiting for revenge, waiting for absolute power? Because the moment Caligula stepped onto that throne, everything changed. Rome believed the nightmare was over, but in reality, it had only just begun. There are emperors remembered for conquest, others for wisdom, some for building empires. But Caligula? Caligula is remembered for something else, for moments so unbelievable, so shocking, so insane, that even today people ask, did this really happen, or is history exaggerating? Because when Caligula ruled Rome, reality began to feel like a nightmare, not because enemies attacked, but because the emperor himself became the danger. And the terrifying part is, everyone had to pretend it was normal. So let me ask you, what do you do when the most powerful man on earth suddenly stops acting like a human and starts acting like a god? What do you do when madness becomes law? Because the shock stories of Caligula are not just rumors, they are warnings. And the first one is famous, but it becomes terrifying when you understand what it actually meant. Caligula loved his horse, not like a man loves an animal, like a king loves a throne. The horse's name was Incitatus, and according to ancient sources, Caligula gave this horse things that even senators couldn't dream of: a marble stable, a golden collar, blankets dyed in purple, the imperial color servants to feed it even a house. And then, the rumor spread across Rome. Caligula wanted to make the horse a consul, a horse, sitting where Rome's greatest men sat. Now think about this. Was he joking, or was he sending a message? Because in Rome, every gesture was politics. And this horse story wasn't funny for the Senate. It was humiliation. It was a warning. It was Caligula screaming without words. Your titles mean nothing. I can replace you with an animal, and Rome will still obey me. So here's the question. How terrified must the senators have been when their emperor's favorite politician was a horse? Then came the event that made even soldiers question reality. One day Caligula marched his legions to the sea. Imagine thousands of elite Roman soldiers standing in formation, waiting for battle. The wind is cold, the sea is loud. They grip their weapons. They're ready for blood. And then Caligula gives the order. Attack the ocean. Yes, the ocean. He commanded the soldiers to strike the waves with swords and spears, steel hitting water, war cries, against nothing. And after this battle, he ordered them to collect seashells, not as souvenirs, as trophies, as if Rome had just conquered the sea. Now tell me, what do you do as a soldier in that moment? Do you laugh? Do you refuse? You can't, because refusing means death. So you stab the water. You scream like a warrior, while your mind is begging, is this a dream? And that's the horror of Caligula. He didn't need enemies to break Rome. He only needed his own madness. The palace became a theater. Everyone acted, everyone lied. Everyone praised him, not because they meant it, but because they wanted to live. Senators laughed at his insanity. Servants clapped at his cruelty. The empire's most powerful men became beggars for survival, because one mistake, one wrong look, one wrong silence could be the last thing you ever did. Under Caligula, death became entertainment. Executions weren't always punishments. Sometimes they were jokes. According to sources, Caligula could order a man killed just because the man didn't smile at the right time, or because Caligula felt bored. Imagine living in that Rome. Imagine waking up and realizing your life depends on the mood of one unstable mind. So ask yourself, how long can a society survive when fear becomes its daily bread? And in the middle of this chaos, Caligula smiled, because he had discovered the ultimate truth of power. If people fear you enough, they will call even your madness genius. They will call terror law. They will call insanity empire.